This is perhaps the most remarkable event in the history of space exploration. Two deadly failures, severe enough to cause complete destruction, by a twist of fate occurring simultaneously, miraculously canceled each other out, not only successfully saving 5 astronauts and billions of dollars worth of space equipment, but also staging a Hollywood-style escape. What exactly happened on that day? The time goes back to 1999. NASA planned to deploy the most powerful telescope of that time into low Earth orbit in order to further study high-energy celestial objects in the deep universe and concentrated physical phenomena. The main character of this mission was the Columbia Space Shuttle, which had already carried out 25 missions and whose appearance looked slightly aged. But the problem was that the weight of the Chandra telescope was truly staggering. In order to be able to lift the most precious passenger, not only were the astronauts reduced to 5, but Columbia was also fitted with lightweight external fuel tanks, as well as the most powerful engines of that time. And because the space shuttle is reusable, the engines replaced for this mission were also ones that had been through as many as 18 previous missions. Under repeated high temperature and high pressure conditions, cracks had appeared in the internal hydrogen delivery pipes of the engines. To prevent fuel leaks from causing a malfunction, engineers decided to use small metal bolts to seal the pipes. The reason for doing this was simple. It was both cost-effective and time-saving, while not affecting engine performance. On July 23, 1999, Columbia stood tall at the Kennedy Space Center. With a tremendous roar, the space shuttle slowly lifted off amid flames and smoke. But just less than 10 seconds after takeoff, one of the bolts broke off in the violent shaking and at a speed of 30 meters per second, shot toward the engine nozzle, ultimately puncturing a small hole in the inner wall. The hydrogen leaking out would cause the fuel tank to lose pressure due to the reduced amount, and the fuel flow controller, in order to maintain pressure, would inject even more hydrogen into the engine. This way, the space shuttle would experience excessive fuel consumption, leading to insufficient fuel and an inability to successfully reach the intended orbit. And what was worse was that during this process, a chain reaction could very likely occur and even trigger an explosion, ultimately causing catastrophic loss of life. Because there were no sensors inside the space shuttle that could detect this, no one at that time knew this deadly malfunction had occurred. Just like this, as the altitude kept climbing, the astronauts sat upright in the cabin unaware, while another crisis was quietly unfolding. One of the overly tightened screws had lifted up a sharp edge and was continuously rubbing against the insulation layer. As the insulation was worn through, the exposed wires caused a short circuit, which instantly knocked out multiple pieces of equipment. Then a piercing alarm sounded in the control room. But by a strange coincidence, among the malfunctioning equipment, there happened to be a computer that controlled the engine hydrogen delivery. This created a bizarre phenomenon. Originally, there were 2 computers regulating the hydrogen pressure. Because the relatively older one of the 2 had short-circuited, the other one mistakenly believed that the hydrogen pressure in the engine was too high, and so began reducing the total hydrogen supply. At this point, a strange twist of fate occurred. The right engine with the punctured hole was consuming too much hydrogen, while the middle engine with the computer malfunction had its hydrogen supply reduced. The 2 effects happened to cancel each other out, causing the hydrogen consumption rate to quickly return to normal. In this process, the slight loss of power caused Columbia to enter space at a slightly lower altitude than expected. But this was subsequently compensated for by the orbital engines, which successfully made up the altitude difference. The mission continued, and the telescope was successfully deployed. Because the engines used during the subsequent return journey functioned normally, these 5 astronauts safely returned to Earth without incident, completing this miraculous survival against all odds. But even so, the space shuttle still did not escape the fate of forced retirement. Because whether it was the Challenger disaster of 1986 or this hydrogen leak incident, NASA from beginning to end never got rid of that bad habit of blind overconfidence. On July 16, 2003, during a space mission, 80 seconds after the Columbia Space Shuttle launched from the Kennedy Space Center, Due to severe atmospheric friction, a piece of insulating foam broke off from the fuel tank and struck the wing of the aircraft. None of this was known. The space shuttle appeared to be unaffected and continued on its original course, entering orbit and carrying out normal work. But this seemingly insignificant sudden accident was destined to become a one-way trip into space. The next day, when ground crew members examined high-resolution images, they discovered the damage and quickly reported it to management for confirmation. Because the rescue plan was extremely complex and costly, and because in the previous 9 flight missions the shuttle had carried out, 6 of them had experienced foam problems, and all had returned safely, they decided to gamble. And it was precisely this gambler's mentality that ultimately caused the aircraft to break apart during its return journey, leaving all 7 astronauts with no survivors. And this series of safety hazards caused the astronauts to leave their lives forever in the vast expanse of space.